Hello and welcome to the second video in my series about keybindings. In this guide I will also look at some of the specific abilities I have bound. However, I won't go into a huge amount of detail, and also I will explain every single one, so even if you don't play Death Knight you can pick abilities based on my reasoning and hopefully come out with the best possible solution for your class. Today we're looking at a technique which only requires a mouse with two buttons on the side and a normal keyboard. It is primarily based on the idea of moving backwards and forwards with the buttons on the side of the mouse and then strafing with two buttons on the keyboard, therefore minimising the amount of use of keyboard for movement. I wanted to leave as much room as possible for casting, and therefore you strafe left and right with your index finger. Ideally your index finger should rest on the H key and then move to the J to strafe right. The thumb currently rests on the spacebar, which is bound to jump. I couldn't think of anything better to do for this particular technique with the thumb. I guess if you wanted to you could bind the spacebar to the special action boss button, although that's not very common in this expansion I've noticed. It uses R, T, F and G for the main rotation. Ideally you should be using your two centre fingers on this to allow maximum ability for speed while casting the central rotation. If you have more moves from 4 in the central rotation, then you could consider expanding it to E and Y as well. That might be a little awkward, however for most classes it's not very common to use more than 4 buttons in the central rotation anyway. I wanted to make some lines of fast cooldowns around this, so that they could be accessed easily with minimal movement. Therefore I've decided to start on 3 and 6 and move down in a line. If you have more fast cooldowns than this, you could consider taking them maybe one extra move out, or try putting one on you if you have less utility to access. For long cooldowns I decided to go a little further afield. As you can see they are around the edges, apart from 4 and 5 which are designed for faster access, as well as C which can be fairly quick at times as well. 1 and 2 are maybe a little further out, and 1 could be moved over to S instead. I decided to use 1 because it's for Army of the Dead for me and I don't want to be casting it by accident. The utility moves I spaced around some of the spare slots in the keyboard. U and 7 for me are both movementy spells, Death's Advance and Gorfine's Grasp, so I decided to put them near the central movement cluster as to allow the index finger to take control of them as well. V is Death Grip, which is more of a taunty ability, and therefore I put it near the central movement cluster so I could access it easily during combat. So the ideal hand position for this is have the thumb resting on the spacebar and the index finger resting on the H, as I said before, for strafing. I have my two centre fingers on T and F, therefore allowing me to move between the central rotation very easily, and then I have my little finger resting on X to the side for quick access to some of the more common fast cooldowns. Death Strike is my main ability, and therefore I've bound it to my right centre finger. That would be T. And F, where my left centre finger sits, is bound to my runic power dump. Also then I have G available for Blood Boil, which would be my main of the Blood Rune abilities, and then I have R bound to Soul Reaper so that I can access that when I need to as well. E and Y are like my dots and my taunt. So E I use to taunt and Y I use for Outbreak, so I can apply diseases easily. For any classes which do dotting, I'd recommend having those two keys bound to that, or if you have fast excess minor cooldowns then that's a good place to put them as well. I then have 6 bound to Bone Shield, which allows me easy access as I want to keep that up as much as possible and cast it as soon as the cooldown is over ideally. 3 I use for my main interrupt because it is a common ability which I want to access quickly, but also it is not vital. Often cast times, especially in PvE, are a little longer, and therefore it doesn't matter if you take a bit longer to cast your interrupt ability. I have 4 and 5 bound to Death Pact and Icebound Fortitude. These for me are both lifesaver abilities which I need to be able to access quickly even if not that often. Therefore I have them bound up to 4 and 5 and I can reach them very quickly and very efficiently. B I have bound to my Rune Tap. This is almost part of my central rotation but not that common, so therefore I thought it would be a good place to put it as I can access it quickly with my index finger when it is needed. V is Death Grip, which almost acts as a second taunt. This is very useful, and perhaps it isn't the perfect place for it because I need to move my right centre finger over quite a long way and it can be a bit of a stretch and reduce accuracy. At the moment I have Anti-Magic Shell bound to K, which isn't ideal to be honest because it's one that I need to access a bit more quickly. If I was thinking for future, I would probably bound it to S instead, which would be faster access and more easy to use. Lastly, I have Blood Tap over X, which is where my little finger rests. I do this because I want to access it quickly as it is a good lifesaver, however I can't access it that often, and my little finger isn't as strong, so I figured putting it on X would be a good idea in order to reduce strain on what is one of my weaker fingers. So this particular technique is very strong at fully utilising all that your fingers have to offer. I would say that if you're not very familiar with your keyboard, then you may struggle a little more because this technique is not very good at rooting down your wrist and you won't have any reference guides. I'd say that some of the positionings are a little awkward because of the nature of the keyboard, however it utilises every finger for few abilities. Obviously, because you have a few of your movement abilities bound to the centre cluster, you will find that things can end up being a little confused. However, this particular technique minimises that, and I do think it is particularly useful to have the strafe buttons bound. So I think this is probably the best compromise that I could come up with. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and please leave a like if you did. If you have any questions, then leave a comment below, or if you want to tell me something, or if you want to troll me. I may not answer if you troll me, but everything else I will try to answer to the best of my ability. So hopefully, I'll see you for the next one.